If you're a kid, please make note of this. It's for your own good.
Yes, I still keep some around.
Star Wars has played a massive part in my love for fiction, and it is a series I continue to invest to this very day. You've likely heard this story before, but this brings us to how much I still enjoy LEGO. I've always had a soft spot for these toys, from the sheer amount of creativity they bring to the table with what you can make with all the pieces each set has, and the overall heart that is put behind it all. I mean, for all the franchises it has a set for, it's practically insane with how much you can do with it, and how much it has grown. I don't invest myself into it as I once did, because I don't want sets taking up too much room or attic space, and, well, they ain't cheap. But there are some I still keep around, because I still do enjoy the brand, and the ones I do keep I will always love. I once made a LEGO minifigure of myself as a Jedi. Let that speak volumes as to how much I invested myself into it. With the rising popularity in these toys, it eventually found its way into the video game market. Now, LEGO has definitely had a lot of video games from the late 90s to the early 2000s, most of which were based off its own ideas rather than an existing film franchise. But for most people, LEGO Star Wars the video game was most people's introduction to LEGO games, and it served as the direction the grand majority of them would take in the future. And I was right among with them. I spent bucket loads of hours on this game and the sequel, LEGO Star Wars The Original Trilogy, when I was young. And back then, I loved exploring environments based on the non-Disney mainline Star Wars films, and just messing around with what I could, especially when my brother got mixed in. Co-op is definitely a selling point of these games, and my brother and I jumped on that like mad. We had so much fun together, and there are several things we did in the game that we'll always remember. So for this National Star Wars Day, and to celebrate the upcoming release of LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga within the coming year or so, I decided to revisit these classics from my childhood and see how much I like them now. Though not through the original releases. I still do have both games on the PS2, but what I like now is a functioning PS2 controller. So to work around this, I'm going to look at them through an updated re-release on 7th gen hardware, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, which is basically the two games combined, plus more levels, more characters, and more content overall. So it could be either A or B, the difference isn't that dramatic. So let's dig up some old memories and go to a galaxy far, far away. I'm not going to go over the setup of the stories in this game, because they're basically abridged retellings of the movies in the original and prequel trilogies. If you haven't seen a single Star Wars film, then hello, I'm Jack, welcome to Earth. But I feel like it was worth including a story segment, because the way it does it is both funny and charming. None of these characters speak, so there is no voice acting in the game. Only LEGO figures expressing themselves and grunting. While I am fine with the voice acting direction later LEGO games would head in, except the instances where they borrowed audio from the film they are telling, I prefer it this way, as it feels more natural with LEGOs, and honestly, it makes the comedic moments a lot funnier than they would be if they had voice acting. The game also does care about letting you enjoy it as a game, so the cutscenes are kept incredibly brief, and get the point across as quickly as possible. Since each level is based on an important part of the movie that has some semblance of action in it, whatever wouldn't translate too well into a LEGO video game is told extremely quickly, or just not included. And for the most part, I don't mind it, as it does come up with a decent way to keep things going, and get back to the action as soon as possible. For example, the pod racing level in this game heavily abbreviates the Tatooine part of Phantom Menace to just finding an expensive generator and winning a race to get it, as opposed to going on about midi-chlorians. The game's campaign on Attack of the Clones pretty much writes out the entire Anakin and Padme romance subplot. I'm guessing they didn't like it either. And while there are small bits dedicated to Darth Vader connecting with Luke and understanding that he can come back to the light side, the resolution to that isn't Luke and Vader fighting each other, but instead a boss fight against Palpatine that lets you control both characters. They do make changes for gaming and co-op sake, but they keep true to what the original scripts were, which I'm actually pretty cool with. I don't have too much else to say other than, aside from a few instances of plot connecting being a tad weak, the stories are funny and charming even if you aren't a fan of the films. But I do think you'll enjoy them more if you are a fan, or at least know what you're getting into. It's quite evident that the Traveller's Tales were fans of these films, because they really worked with what they had to replicate each represented part. Even with a few muddy textures and the occasional shot that looks like they'd used a JPEG, it does feel like a genuine recreation that fits in the LEGO aspect very nicely. The LEGO minifigures themselves are decently animated, the models of each of the ships look like they are made using actual LEGO models as a basis, and I do like how both in cutscenes and in gameplay, several visual aspects do take advantage of just about everything being made of LEGOs, adding in the brand's charm. But I do want to talk about some things audio related. The soundtrack is mostly composed of various tracks from the actual films, which is why I'm using different music I randomly chose, because you know why. I more so mean the sound design, as it really does make certain things in the game feel satisfying. I'll go over mini kits and stud collecting in the gameplay segment, but the biggest reason why I love collecting them is just for the sound effects that play when you get them. I knew I did a good getting them, but man, they leave an absolute impact of accomplishment. Like, seriously, you could probably use them for mundane tasks, and it would instantly feel a lot better.
No, should probably take a drink. Cool!
Though not everything hits the mark. For some reason when I was playing this game on PC, it would occasionally stutter for a brief second before moving on like nothing happened. It didn't happen all the time, but was enough to get me to notice, so I'm not sure how well the game is optimized for the PCs of today, or if I'm doing something wrong. There were also some weird instances of certain motions not registering at specific moments, and the audio in this cutscene just flat out gave up. No, I did not edit this. The audio just cut out before resuming when the cutscene ended. And while on the cutscenes, I really don't know how some of their animations got messed with during the transition from the original versions to this one. Like, Luke's reaction to Obi-Wan dying in the original version looked perfectly fine, but here? What? Okay, so the presentation is pretty spotty in areas, but you can tell there was effort into making it look authentic and run perfectly. And since it mostly accomplishes that task, I'd definitely give it a thumbs up. If there's a phrase I can use to describe this game from a gameplay standpoint, it's that it does so much with admittedly a little bit. At the game's core, you're just running around levels collecting studs and various other collectibles, and beating up goods in order to reach at point B to make the plot continue. It's the structure for the grand majority of the levels in the game, but it's made interesting and fun by the characters the game gives you, and just what each of them can do in general. While the enormous size of this roster is impressive, it feels more like a depiction of one specific class type, which ranges from Jedi, Sith, characters with a blaster, bounty hunter, droid that's only good for activating switches and nothing else, and characters who are just there to make the roster number go up. Like, seriously, Boss, Nass, Admiral Akbar, and Dexter from the 50s diner that Obi-Wan goes to do absolutely nothing. Don't bother with them. Not even the game does in other modes. There's also the fact that multiple slots are taken up by the same character, but given how the game follows the plot of the movies, I can get over this. Most of the time, you play as a Jedi, but the blaster characters do provide a different method of approach to certain challenges, and while the droids that can activate switches can't do anything else, admittedly the game does make some good use out of that with various puzzles. So if you ask me, this design choice makes sense. The puzzles themselves are pretty rudimentary for the most part, but I will admit, there are a select few that do get a little more intricate with what characters you have on you. And when you're not doing any of these puzzles, there are plenty of enemies you'll have to fight. For gun characters, fight sequences are okay. I'm not a fan of how you can only dodge when hitting the attack button while standing still. Makes these encounters feel a little too samey for my liking. But because most enemies die in one hit, these don't take very long, and the gun characters are still handy in taking out targets from afar. Combat with the lightsaber, however, is very enjoyable, and most of the time when you're in combat, you'll have a lightsaber on you. Every character does have a normal 3-hit combo, but delaying button presses leads to stronger attacks, which are reliable for enemies that don't die as easily. They have an aerial lunge and an aerial dive, the latter of which is great for crowds, and by hitting the attack button as soon as a bullet is about to hit you, you can bounce it back. This can be finicky sometimes, but it is great to have nonetheless. The levels each have their own fair share of combat sections and puzzles, with a select number of them taking place in vehicles, but they mostly revolve around collecting as many studs and trinkets as possible before the end. The levels themselves are largely reflective on both the setting they take place in, and the scene from the original movie that is currently going on, and to keep true to the game nature, they stick primarily to the action set pieces, and either abbreviate or leave out anything else. And honestly, one of the things I enjoy most about the game is how well the game makes you feel like I'm playing a LEGO version of that particular scene. They stay true to what the original movies were all about, and translate them really well into video game format. It's also really cool how they nailed their own take on the opening of A New Hope. The factory and arena levels in Attack of the Clones really did shake things up. Then again, the original seeds basically laid the blueprints out, so it was easier for Traveler's Tales to go nuts. The way they captured the spirit and presentation of some of the vehicle battles is kinda hypnotizing, especially in the case of the Battle of Coruscant and Revenge of the Sith, and the Battle of Hoth and Empire Strikes Back. And the level that ends Revenge of the Sith, which represents the final duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan on Mustafar, actually ends off with both players fighting each other instead of 2 players versus 1 AI, which is actually really inventive and completely caught me off guard back when I was younger. There are still a few choices for levels I question a bit, especially Kashyyyk and Revenge of the Sith, which I only think was included to make Chewie playable in the original game, and there are a few levels that I'm not a fan of execution-wise, like the speeder bike level in Return of the Jedi, which is awkward when going for collectibles, and weirdly enough, the pod race in Phantom Menace, which honestly feels a bit easy and anticlimactic. But these are not just the scenes in game form, there's plenty to collect within them. Studs both go to the True Jedi bar I mentioned earlier, which gets filled after hitting a certain amount, and acts as a form of currency that you can use to buy characters and extra gameplay boosts at the main shop. The frequency of studs depends on the level, as does the requirement needed to reach True Jedi for it, but I really think you should go after them, because these actually do give you more bang for your buck in terms of content. Some of the later purchases get a little pricey, and getting True Jedi gives you one of 3 gold bricks, which are needed to unlock some bonus levels, and act as the biggest contributor to 100% completion if you're interested in that. If you see a stud, especially a blue one, or an extremely rare purple one, it'll help you in the long run. But in order to fully complete a level, there's 2 other gold bricks, and a red brick that you need to get. You get 1 gold brick just by beating the level, and the third one is rewarded to you if you get all of that level's mini-kits, of which there are 10, and most likely locked behind an obstacle that you won't be able to get through on your story mode playthrough, because of the characters you have. The red bricks, however, you get by just finding them, but they're hidden like the mini-kits, and you likely won't get them on your first visit in story mode. So how do you get them if your story mode characters can't? Well, that's where free play comes in, and this is what I remembered loving the most about these games when I was younger. You get to replay the levels, but with a roster of characters who fulfill all the needs you have in order to get everything. Honestly, I enjoyed this revisit because the characters you have let you access certain parts of a level you could not get to before, and letting you skip certain sections with the right character, making the level go by somewhat faster. And above all else, I just enjoy using whatever characters I feel like, regardless if they actually fit in or not. With this, I can get Windu to kill both Jango and his son, make Darth Vader fight himself, and get Obi-Wan to cause a time paradox by killing his younger self. You'll need to free play each level once in order to get True Jedi, the mini-kits, the red bricks, and the gold bricks, which make for 2 playthroughs. But then we get to challenge mode and super story mode, and this is where I think the completion journey gets a little too tiresome. Challenge mode is essentially like free play mode, but there are 10 blue mini-kits hidden throughout the level in different locations than the normal mini-kits, and you need to find them within a time limit. Now, the time limit is very generous. You'll likely finish them in much less time than what you're asked for, but it doesn't change the fact that you're just trekking the entire level again, getting 10 of one collectible, all for the sake of getting another gold brick. That's not a good reason to do another playthrough. Also, depending on the level, there is a slight chance that if you miss a mini-kit and go past the point of no return, you basically have to redo the entire level. That sounds more like a player problem, I know, but there's not much in this mode in order to warrant playing it again. Sadly, super stories don't get much better. Here you're just replaying one episode story mode again, under an hour, and ensuring you get 100,000 studs by the end. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about any collectibles, and any studs you collect in one level carry over to the next, so you can just run to the end not caring. But does that warrant a 4th revisit? In my eyes, not really. I enjoy these levels, but these runs really started to push it a little, only for the sake of making a number go up, and nothing else. But there are a few things that I think are good additions to a completion log. After beating one episode story, you gain access to both a character bonus level and a mini-kit bonus level. The mini-kits by themselves act as a way to give you more studs, and construct a ship that you can use for the latter. These both have the same objectives of you just going around and collecting 1 million studs before a 5-minute timer hits 0. But because there are new open environments, new things to destroy, and studs everywhere, it's fun just going around shooting up whatever's in sight, and seeing that money counter go up. Granted, it's all only for more gold bricks, and not a form of money grinding, but at least it's something fresh and new, as are the bounty hunter missions. When you get all the bounty hunters in the shop, you unlock these missions where you need to find a character in the level on a time limit. These are the same layouts from the main levels, but I think this revisit is warranted because you are confined to only a small portion of it, and it doesn't ask anything else from you other than to just find the character. Some are bigger than others, but these only take about 3 to 4 minutes tops because they're so bite-sized, and a good way to shake things up. So I've mentioned gold bricks a lot, so what do you get for actually going after everything? Well, not only do the gold bricks net you 100,000 studs every time you get one, which you can use as money, but getting totals of 10 all the way up to 60 will unlock bonus levels in a separate room. And these levels are really cool extras for going after these things, ranging from the opening of A New Hope from Vader's perspective, to a level based off Anakin destroying the Separatist ship at the end of Phantom Menace, to the original versions of the pod racing and gunship levels, to 2 levels taking place within
Lego City,
which are also really cool. The red bricks let you have access to cheats that you can buy in the shop, which are helpful in making completion easier. I didn't use these for any of my story mode playthroughs, but I admit I used some of them during a bit of post-game content because I think this is a cool reward for exploring. That and I've got stuff to do, and I want to cut back on the padding. The cheats also have to be bought first, but given some of the score multipliers, there are some easy ways to get a large sum of studs. Or you could just enter a cheat code and get certain things that way if you really don't have the time. Or use the cheat code function to spell out weird gibberish that the Gungans should learn from. You do you. I may have had a lot to say about a game that at its core is relatively straightforward, but barring the challenge mode and super story mode, I just had a lot of fun revisiting this, and despite its simplicity, it's well balanced and surprisingly kind of addicting for what it is. I surprisingly sunk over 20 hours into this, and I don't have that much burnout, something I can say for myself when I play a bunch of LEGO games back to back. I'd honestly say that this fact is proof that this game is still a lot of fun to play today, and it's definitely held up over the years, which is quite impressive. Revisiting this game now, I can see why 8-year-old me was so into this. This game doesn't particularly break new grounds or take big risks, but it goes nuts with the foundation, and the dedication it has towards fans made coming back feel both very natural and very pleasant. Even when it comes to the little things, it's clear that the devs wanted to make a game that charms both LEGO fans and Star Wars fans, while still being a good game that anyone can sink their teeth into. While I was reminded a bit of why I dropped off the LEGO bandwagon, as any positives that can be said about one LEGO game can be applied to the rest, regardless of what franchise they represent, and the fact that this game got so popular, LEGO games saw upwards of 2 or even 3 new entries a year, which got tiresome for me. But that made me playing this with a fresh mind all the more enjoyable, and I think you'll like it too. I am the Lightning Gripper, and to end this video off, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite death sound effects.